The cold had teeth. That was the only way Kessa could describe it as she stumbled through the abandoned corridors of refuge station's outer sectors. Her forearms clutched her infant daughter Mira close to her chest, trying desperately to share what little body heat remained in her failing Velen physiology. The temperature gauge on the wall flickered one last time before dying completely. -40 degrees. For a species that evolved on a warm, humid world, it might as well have been the surface of an ice moon. Kessa's pale blue skin had already begun to darken at the edges, a warning sign her people knew too well. Hypothermia was setting in. Her triple-jointed legs moved slower with each step, her muscles refusing to respond properly. Behind her, the emergency bulkheads had sealed shut 3 sectors ago, cutting off any route back to the evacuation zones. She had stayed behind to help an injured Thracian elder reach the transport ships. By the time she finished, the final shuttle had departed, and the station's life support had failed catastrophically. The infant in her arms whimpered softly, her tiny face scrunched against the cold. Mira was only 3 months old by human standard measurements, barely aware of the universe beyond warmth and hunger and her mother's heartbeat. She did not understand that they were dying. Kessa was grateful for that small mercy. The Velen mother found a small maintenance alcove and sank to the floor. Her legs would not carry her any further. The metal floor felt like ice against her body, drawing away what little heat she had left. With trembling hands, she unwrapped the thermal blanket from around her own shoulders. It was standard station issue, designed for emergencies, but woefully inadequate for the current conditions. Still, it was all she had. Kessa wrapped Mira carefully, using all 4 arms to ensure every centimeter of her daughter's small body was covered. She tucked the edges tight, creating a cocoon that might preserve the infant's warmth for a few hours longer. Perhaps when the rescue teams returned to salvage the station, they would find her. Perhaps Mira would survive where her mother could not. "I am sorry, little star," Kessa whispered in her native tongue, her breath forming crystals in the air. "I tried to get us home." Her vision was blurring now, the edges darkening. The Velen biological response to extreme cold was swift and brutal. Their bodies simply shut down rather than struggle. It was an evolutionary trait from their homeworld, where cold snaps were brief and shelter always nearby. Here, in the vast emptiness of space, it was a fatal weakness. Kessa curled her body around her daughter, using her larger frame to create one final barrier against the killing cold. She could no longer feel her extremities. Her secondary hearts had already stopped beating, leaving only her primary heart to labor alone. Each breath came harder than the last, ice forming in her respiratory system. She thought of her partner, Ven, who had died in the attack that destroyed their colony ship. She thought of her homeworld, warm and green and impossibly far away. She thought of all the things Mira would never know, never experience. The unfairness of it burned hotter than the cold. Her eyes closed. The darkness was gentle, almost welcoming. At least the pain was fading. At least she had tried. At least Mira was wrapped warm, given every chance Kessa could provide. Time lost meaning in the cold and dark. Seconds or hours might have passed. Kessa's consciousness flickered like a dying flame, barely present, ready to extinguish completely. Then impossibly warmth. It started at her back, a gradual heat that her failing mind could not process. Was this death? Some final hallucination as her brain shut down? The warmth grew stronger, spreading across her body like sunrise on her homeworld. She felt movement, felt herself being lifted, but her frozen muscles could not respond. Strong arms slid beneath her body, cradling both her and Mira together. The grip was firm but careful, supporting her weight with surprising ease. The warmth intensified, radiating from whoever held her. It felt like being near a heating unit, but alive, pulsing with biological heat that seemed impossible in these conditions. Kessa tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids were frozen shut. She tried to speak, but her vocal cords would not respond. All she could do was exist in that moment, held by unknown hands, feeling warmth return to her dying body in slow, painful increments. She heard sounds. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful. A voice, deep and rhythmic, speaking in galactic common with an accent she could not place through her confusion. The words were indistinct, but the tone was calm, reassuring. The same tone one might use to comfort a frightened animal. The movement continued, steady and quick. Whoever carried them was moving with purpose, navigating the frozen corridors with confidence. Kessa felt turns, felt the slight changes in air pressure as they passed through doorways. Her rescuer knew where they were going. Minutes passed. The warmth continued to work its way into her core, painful and wonderful at once. Her primary heart beat stronger. Her lungs drew deeper breaths. The darkness receded slightly, though her eyes remained sealed. Then stillness. They had stopped moving. She heard more sounds. Fabric rustling. Equipment being moved. A sharp hiss of atmosphere being equalized. Then she was being lowered gently onto a soft surface, Mira still clutched against her chest. Heat flooded over them from above. Artificial heat this time from a proper thermal unit. Kessa's body began to respond, her advanced hypothermia slowly reversing. It would be a long process. Her species needed careful, gradual rewarming to avoid shock. Somehow, her rescuers seemed to know this, as the temperature increased in gentle increments rather than all at once. She felt Mira being carefully unwrapped, checked, then placed beside her on the warming surface. Her daughter's cry pierced the air, weak but alive. Kessa's heart surged with relief so powerful it brought tears to her frozen eyes. The moisture melted the ice on her eyelids. Slowly, painfully, Kessa forced her eyes open. The first thing she saw was a face hovering above her, studying her with concerned brown eyes. A human face. The features were unmistakable, even to her disoriented mind. Pale skin flushed with exertion. Dark hair plastered to the forehead with sweat. The flat nose and forward-facing eyes of a species that evolved as persistence hunters on a death world called Earth. The human spoke again, this time slower, making sure she could understand. "You are safe now. Both of you. Just rest and let the heat work. You are going to be okay." Kessa tried to respond but only managed a weak sound. The human nodded as if understanding anyway, then moved away to adjust the heating controls. She watched him work, her mind struggling to process what had happened. A human had been out there in -40-degree cold. Had found them. Had carried them both to safety. The stories she had heard about humans surviving in conditions that would kill any other known species suddenly seemed very real. As consciousness faded again, this time into healing sleep rather than death, Kessa's last thought was wonder. Wonder at the warmth of human arms that had pulled her back from the edge of forever. Kessa woke to the sound of her daughter crying. Not the weak, dying whimper from before, but a healthy, angry wail that demanded attention. Her eyes snapped open and she sat up too quickly, causing her vision to blur. 4 arms reached instinctively for Mira before her mind fully caught up with her body. "Easy there," a voice said in galactic common. "You have been out for about 2 hours. Your body needs more time to recover." Kessa turned toward the voice and found the human sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby, watching her with those strange forward-facing eyes. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps in his early 30s by human standards. His dark hair was still damp, and he wore a simple thermal suit that looked entirely inadequate for the conditions outside. The shelter around them was small, barely 3 meters across. Emergency supplies lined one wall. A portable heating unit hummed in the corner, flooding the space with blessed warmth. Through a small window she could see the frozen wasteland of the outer sectors, ice coating every surface. "My daughter," Kessa managed, her voice rough and weak. "She is fine," the human said, gesturing to where Mira lay wrapped in thermal blankets on a padded surface. "Checked her vitals. No frostbite, no hypothermia. You protected her well." Kessa felt tears sting her eyes. Mira was alive. They were both alive. It seemed impossible. "I am Tom Blake," the human said, offering a slight smile. "Salvage operator. Was pulling medical supplies from the abandoned sectors when I heard your little one crying." Kessa stared at him, her mind trying to process his words. "You heard her? But the evacuation happened hours ago. How long were you out there?" Tom shrugged, a gesture she recognized from her studies of human body language. "About 6 hours, give or take. Lost track of time once I got into the work. These medical supplies are critical for the colonies. Could not just leave them behind." 6 hours, Kessa repeated slowly. "In -40-degree temperature? Closer to -45 in some sections," Tom corrected as if this were a minor detail. "The storm made it worse. Wind chill probably pushed it lower." Kessa felt her respiratory system constrict with shock. 6 hours. No species she knew could survive that kind of exposure, not even with the best thermal gear. She looked at Tom more carefully now, noting the flush in his cheeks, the slight tremor in his hands that he seemed to be ignoring. "You are hypothermic," she said, recognizing the signs. "You need treatment." Tom waved a hand dismissively. "I just need to warm up a bit. Happens all the time in this line of work. My core temperature dropped some, but nothing dangerous. Human bodies are pretty good at handling temperature extremes." "Nothing dangerous?" Kessa could not keep the disbelief from her voice. You worked for 6 hours in conditions that would kill my species in minutes and you call it nothing dangerous? Well, it was not exactly comfortable, Tom admitted with a small grin. But I grew up on a colony world with harsh winters. You learn to work through the cold. The trick is to keep moving, keep your blood flowing. The human body generates a lot of heat when active. Kessa watched him retrieve a thermal pack from the supplies and press it against his chest, as casual as if he were having a cup of tea. This was insane. Everything about this situation violated what she understood about biology and survival. You said you heard Mira crying, she said, trying to understand. Oh. We were deep in the outer sectors. The storm outside would mask any sound. Human hearing is pretty sensitive, Tom explained, adjusting the thermal pack. Especially to certain frequencies. Baby cries, screams, calls for help. Our brains are wired to pick those sounds out even through interference. Evolution thing. Predator awareness and tribal bonding. From a kilometer away? Through station walls and a storm? Tom tilted his head, considering. Probably closer to 800 meters, but yeah. Once I heard it, I could track the direction. Took about 20 minutes to locate you both. You had hidden pretty deep in that alcove. Kessa felt her mind reeling. The stories about humans and their death world origins were common across the galaxy. She had heard tales of their endurance, their ability to survive in conditions that killed other species. But hearing it and experiencing it were entirely different things. Why did you stay behind? She asked. The station was evacuated. You could have left with the others. Tom's expression grew more serious. The medical supplies in those cargo bays are worth more than credits. Vaccines, emergency medicines, surgical tools. The outer colonies are desperate for them. People will die without those supplies. I could not just abandon them because the station lost power. You risked your life for cargo. I risked my life for people I will never meet, Tom corrected gently. Big difference. Besides, I knew I could handle the cold for a while. Grew up in worse on Trost 4. Winter there hits -60 on a warm day. Kessa stared at him, this human who spoke of lethal temperatures as mere inconvenience. Your planet. What is it like? Tom laughed, a warm sound that filled the small shelter. Earth? Earth is beautiful and terrible. We have deserts that hit 50 degrees Celsius in summer and -50 in winter. Mountains with air so thin most species would pass out. Oceans with pressure that would crush a shuttle. Storms that flatten cities. Predators that hunt in packs. Diseases that evolve faster than we can cure them. He paused, his expression softening. But we also have forests that stretch forever. Sunsets that paint the sky in colors you cannot imagine. Music and art and stories. We learned to survive everything our world threw at us, and that made us stubborn. Maybe too stubborn. Not stubborn, Kessa said quietly. Strong. Tom shook his head. Not stronger. Just different. Your people are stronger in other ways. You stayed behind to help someone else evacuate. You used your last energy to protect your daughter. That takes a different kind of strength. Outside, the wind howled against the shelter walls. The temperature display showed -48 degrees. Kessa shuddered just thinking about it. Tom glanced at the display and frowned slightly. Getting colder. Storm must be intensifying. He stood and checked the heating unit controls. We have enough power to keep warm for 48 hours. Help should arrive before then. And if it does not? Kessa asked. Tom met her eyes and she saw no fear there. Only determination. Then we keep surviving until it does. That is what humans do best. We endure. Kessa looked at this strange, impossible being who had pulled her from death itself. This human who treated deadly cold as an inconvenience and risked everything for strangers. She thought of all the species in the galaxy, with their specialized adaptations and environmental requirements. Humans had no claws, no armor, no venom. They were not the fastest or strongest. But they had something else. Something that let them walk through killing cold to save a crying infant they had never met. They had persistence. They had choice. They had the ability to decide that another life mattered more than their own comfort or safety. Thank you, Kessa whispered. Thank you for my daughter's life. Tom smiled and returned to his seat on the floor. Thank me when we all get out of here safely. For now, rest. You both need to recover. As Kessa lay back down, listening to Myra's steady breathing, she realized something profound. Humanity's true strength was not physical. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to let others die alone in the cold. The first sign of real trouble came 6 hours after Kessa woke. Mira had been fussing for the past hour, refusing to settle, her cries growing more desperate. Kessa tried everything she knew but nothing worked. Her daughter was hungry and what Kessa could offer was not enough. Tom noticed immediately. He had been organizing the emergency supplies, taking inventory of what they had to work with. When Myra's cries shifted from annoyed to distressed, he stopped what he was doing and came over. "What does she need?" he asked simply. Kessa felt shame burn through her. "Specialized formula. Velen infants require specific nutrients that my body cannot produce in these conditions. The stress, the cold, it has affected my system. I cannot feed her properly." Tom was quiet for a moment, thinking. How long can she go without it? "Maybe 12 hours, Kessa said, her voice breaking. "Perhaps less. She is already weakened from the cold exposure." Tom moved to his supply pack and pulled out a data pad. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, pulling up station maps and inventory lists. Kessa watched him work, hope and dread warring in her chest. "Sector 7, Tom said after a minute. "The medical cargo bay. I was there yesterday pulling supplies. I remember seeing containers marked for infant nutrition, multiple species types." Kessa felt hope flare. "How far?" 3 kilometers. Tom was already checking the temperature readings outside. "Current conditions are -50 degrees. The storm is still building." "You cannot go out there," Kessa said immediately. 3 kilometers in those conditions, even for a human, it is suicide. Tom looked at her with those strange, determined eyes. "What choice do we have? Your daughter will die if I do nothing. I might die if I go. Might is better than certain. But the risk." "I have been in worse," Tom said, though Kessa suspected he might be lying to make her feel better. "I know the route. I know where the heated junction points are. I can make it work." He started pulling on additional thermal layers, preparing for the journey. Kessa watched him, feeling helpless. This human was about to risk his life for her daughter, a child of another species, on a station he had no obligation to protect. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do this?" Tom paused in his preparations. For a long moment he did not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Because I can. Because she needs help and I am here. That is enough." He finished gearing up, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. Extra thermal packs, emergency beacon, rope, medical kit. He moved like someone who had done dangerous work many times before. "The communication system is completely down," Tom said as he prepared to leave. "No way to call for help. But the next supply ship is scheduled to arrive in 42 hours. If I am not back in 6 hours, do not come looking for me. Just keep yourself and Mira warm and wait for rescue." "Understood." Kessa wanted to argue, but she simply nodded. What else could she do? Tom sealed his helmet and moved to the shelter door. He paused there, looking back. "My data pad is on the supply crate. If you get bored, there are books loaded on it. Some music. Whatever helps pass the time." Then he was gone, disappearing into the white storm outside. Kessa watched through the small window as his figure became a blur, then vanished completely. The wind howled like a living thing and the temperature display dropped another degree. She held Mira close, rocking her gently, trying to soothe her hungry cries. "He will come back," she whispered. "He has to come back." The minutes crawled past. Mira cried herself into an exhausted sleep, her small body going limp in Kessa's arms. Kessa checked her vital signs constantly, watching for any deterioration. So far her daughter was stable, but the clock was ticking. After 2 hours of anxious waiting, Kessa noticed Tom's data pad where he had left it. She hesitated, then picked it up. He had said she could use it. Perhaps there was something there that would distract her from her worry. The device unlocked easily, no password protection. The main screen showed a simple background image of a sunset over mountains. Earth, probably. She navigated through the menus, finding the books and music he had mentioned. But then she noticed another folder, simply labeled Personal. She should not look. It was private. But something made her open it anyway. The first file was a journal, entries dated over the past 3 years. Kessa started reading and her heart broke with every word. Tom had been married. His wife's name was Sarah. They had 2 children, a boy named Michael and a girl named Sophie. They had lived on a colony world called Haven's Rest, a small mining settlement on the edge of explored space. 3 years ago there had been an accident. A reactor malfunction. The evacuation had been chaotic, disorganized. Tom had been off-world on a supply run. By the time he got back, the colony was gone. Everyone on it. His entire family, along with 400 other people. The journal entries after that were painful to read. Tom blamed himself. He had been the one who suggested they move to Haven's Rest for his work. He had been the one who was not there when they needed him. He wrote about the guilt, the anger, the crushing weight of survival when everyone he loved had died. But then the entries changed. Slowly, over months, Tom wrote about finding purpose. He could not save his family, but he could save others. He took jobs that no one else wanted, the dangerous salvage operations, the rescue missions, the supply runs to desperate colonies. He put himself in harm's way again and again, pulling people from disaster. One entry, dated 6 months ago, stood out to Kessa. Sarah would tell me I am being reckless. She would be right. But every person I pull from danger, every supply run I complete, every risk I take that saves someone else, it feels like I am paying back a debt. I could not save them. But I can save others. That has to mean something. That has to be enough. Kessa set the data pad down with shaking hands. She understood now. Tom was not fearless. He was not immune to pain. He carried grief that would destroy most beings, and he channeled it into protecting strangers. He endured emotional trauma that was just as deadly as the physical cold outside, and somehow he kept functioning, kept helping, kept saving lives. Humans did not just survive harsh environments. They survived loss, guilt, trauma, and they transformed that pain into purpose. She looked down at Mira, sleeping fitfully in her arms. Tom was out there right now, walking through killing cold to save her daughter. Not because he had to. Not because of duty or obligation. But because he had lost his own children and refused to let another parent feel that pain if he could prevent it. 4 hours passed. Then 5. Kessa watched the door, the window, the temperature display that kept dropping. -52 now. The storm showed no signs of stopping. At 5 hours and 40 minutes, she saw movement through the window. A shape emerging from the white chaos. Stumbling, slower than before but moving with purpose. Tom appeared at the door, covered in ice, his thermal suit frosted white. He carried a sealed container under one arm. He fell through the doorway more than walked, and Kessa rushed to help him. "Got it?" Tom said through chattering teeth, his lips blue. "Formula. Multiple types. Found yours." He thrust the container at her with frozen hands, then collapsed onto the floor, his body shaking violently. Kessa caught Tom as he collapsed, all 4 of her arms working to lower him gently to the floor. Ice cracked and fell from his thermal suit in chunks. His skin had gone pale, almost gray, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. This was bad. Even for a human, this was very bad. "Stay with me," Kessa said urgently, even as she grabbed the formula container he had brought. Her hands shook as she opened it, finding several sealed packets inside. She searched frantically until she found the one marked with Velen symbols. Thank the ancestors it was here. Mira woke at the commotion, her cries filling the shelter again. Kessa worked quickly, preparing the formula with one hand while supporting Tom's head with another. The powder mixed with water from their supplies, and within seconds she had a bottle ready. She fed Mira first, knowing Tom would want that. Her daughter latched onto the bottle desperately, drinking with the urgent hunger of a starving infant. Kessa watched her feed, tears streaming down her face, while Tom lay shivering violently on the floor beside her. The moment Mira finished and settled into sleep, Kessa turned her full attention to Tom. She had read about human hypothermia in her medical training, but Velen rewarming techniques were different. Gentler. Her species had evolved methods to slowly raise body temperature without shocking the system. She prayed it would work on human biology. First, she removed his frozen outer layers, her 4 arms making quick work of the iced-over fastenings. His inner clothing was damp with sweat that had frozen against his skin. That had to come off too, but carefully. She replaced each piece with dry thermal blankets from their supplies, wrapping him in layers. Tom's shivering was extreme now, his whole body convulsing. That was actually good, Kessa remembered. Shivering meant his body was still trying to warm itself. It was when the shivering stopped that death became certain. She activated 2 more thermal packs and placed them carefully against his chest and stomach, not directly on skin but wrapped in cloth. Too much heat too fast would send him into shock. The Velen technique required patience, gradual warming that let the body adjust naturally. "Come on, Tom," she whispered, positioning herself beside him to share her own recovered body heat. "You did not walk through that storm just to die here. Stay with me." His eyes were closed, but she could see rapid movement beneath the lids. He was conscious somewhere in there, trapped in his body's emergency response. She checked his pulse at his neck, finding it rapid but present. His breathing was shallow but steady. Kessa had never felt so helpless. This human had saved her life, saved her daughter's life, and now she could only wait and hope that her techniques would work on his alien physiology. An hour passed. The shivering began to decrease, which should have been good, but Tom's skin was still too cold. Kessa increased the warming rate slightly, adding another thermal pack, adjusting the shelter's heating unit higher. She massaged his limbs gently, trying to encourage blood flow back to his extremities. Then Tom started talking. At first it was just mumbled sounds, nothing coherent. But gradually words formed. Names. Sarah, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. I should have been there. Kessa's heart clenched. She knew that name from his journal. Michael, Tom continued, his head moving restlessly. Buddy, I'm sorry. Dad should have been there. Should have protected you. His breathing quickened, becoming distressed. Kessa put a hand on his forehead, trying to soothe him even though he could not truly hear her. Sophie, Tom said, and his voice broke on the name. Baby girl. I tried to get back. I'm so sorry. Tears were leaking from his closed eyes now. Kessa had never seen a human cry before. The water tracked down his temples, disappearing into his hair. His body was warming, but his mind was trapped somewhere in the past, reliving the worst moments of his life. I should have saved you, Tom whispered. All of you. What kind of father wasn't there when you needed him? Kessa felt her own tears fall. She understood now, truly understood. Tom carried this pain every day. He lived with the guilt of surviving when his family had not. And instead of letting it destroy him, he transformed it into action. Every person he saved was an attempt to balance some cosmic scale, to make meaning from his loss. Just one more, Tom mumbled, his shivering picking up again. Just one more kid to save. Have to try. Can't let another one die. Can't. You did save her, Kessa told him, even though he probably could not hear. Mira is alive because of you. You saved us both. His breathing began to even out. The color was slowly returning to his face, pink spreading across his cheeks. His core temperature was rising, the danger period passing. Kessa kept the warming process steady, monitoring him constantly. Another hour passed. Tom's mumbling faded into quiet breathing. His body had stopped shivering entirely, now warm enough that his natural systems could take over. Kessa checked his vitals again and felt relief wash over her. He was going to survive. She sat back, exhausted, and looked at this strange, broken, beautiful being. Humans were not extraordinary because they could endure physical hardship, she realized. Any species could be tough given the right evolution. Humans were extraordinary because they could endure emotional devastation and still choose to help others. Tom had lost everything that mattered to him. His whole world had been destroyed. And his response was not revenge or despair or withdrawal. His response was to make sure no one else had to feel that pain if he could prevent it. He channeled his grief into saving strangers. He turned his trauma into purpose. That was the real strength of humanity. Not their ability to survive harsh planets or extreme temperatures, but their ability to survive loss and still choose compassion. To carry unbearable pain and still reach out to others. To remember their dead by protecting the living. Kessa thought of all the species in the galaxy, each with their own strengths and adaptations. The Thracians with their logical minds. The Kellans with their incredible strength. The Velans with their artistic sensitivity. But none of them, she thought, had this particular quality. This stubborn insistence on caring even when caring brought pain. Tom's eyes finally opened, focusing slowly. He looked at Kessa with confusion for a moment, then awareness returned. Mira? He asked immediately, his voice rough. Sleeping peacefully, Kessa assured him. Fed and healthy thanks to you. Tom tried to sit up but Kessa gently pushed him back down. Rest. You nearly died out there. What happened? Sector 7 was partially collapsed, Tom said quietly. Had to navigate in the dark. Power was completely out. Took longer than expected. You could have turned back. Tom met her eyes. No. I really could not have. Kessa understood. For Tom, turning back would have meant letting another child die. After what he had lost, that was not something he could survive. I read your journal, Kessa admitted. I'm sorry. I should not have, but I did. I know about Sarah, Michael, and Sophie. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then you know I am not brave. I am just trying to make up for not being there when it mattered. No, Kessa said firmly. You are brave because you keep trying even though it hurts. You save others even though it reminds you of who you could not save. That is not weakness, Tom. That is the strongest thing I have ever seen. Tom looked away but not before she saw fresh tears in his eyes. They sat in silence for a while, sharing the warmth of the shelter while the storm raged outside. Thank you, Tom finally said, for saving my life just now. We are even. Kessa shook her head. We will never be even. But I will spend the rest of my life trying. The rescue ship arrived 36 hours later, cutting through the storm with powerful engines designed for extreme conditions. Kessa heard them before she saw them, the deep rumble of heavy shuttles descending toward the station. She was at the window immediately, holding Mira in her arms, watching as lights appeared through the white chaos outside. Tom was already gathering their few possessions, moving carefully. He had recovered well over the past day and a half, though Kessa could see he was still tired. They had spent the time talking, sharing stories, learning about each other's worlds. Tom had told her about Earth's oceans. She had told him about Vela's crystal forests. They had found comfort in the exchange, two survivors keeping each other company through the long wait. The rescue team came through the outer airlock in full environmental suits, their helmet lights cutting through the dim shelter. The lead rescuer stopped short when he saw them, his shock visible even through his faceplate. "Survivors," he said into his comm, "2 adults, 1 infant. All alive. Get medical up here immediately." Within minutes, the small shelter was crowded with rescue personnel. Medical scanners were passed over Kessa and Mira, checking their vitals. A human medic examined Tom with particular attention, frowning at the readings. "Your core temperature was how low?" the medic asked. Tom shrugged. "Not sure. Did not have a working scanner. Low enough to be a problem." "Low enough that you should be dead," the medic corrected sharply. "What were you thinking going out in those conditions?" "That an infant needed formula," Tom said simply, nodding toward Mira. The medic looked at Mira, then at the empty formula container, then back at Tom. Understanding dawned on his face. "You went to Sector 7? In that storm?" "Someone had to." The rescue team worked efficiently, preparing to evacuate them to the ship. Kessa was wrapped in additional thermal blankets, Mira secured in a protective carrier designed for infant transport. Tom refused a stretcher, insisting he could walk on his own. On the ship, they were taken to the medical bay for thorough examinations. Kessa and Mira were cleared quickly, their recovery remarkable given what they had endured. Tom's examination took longer. The doctors muttered among themselves about tissue damage and extreme exposure, but ultimately declared him fit to travel. Station Commander Patricia Wells came to see them before they departed for the nearest hub station. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Blake," she said, standing at attention beside his medical bed. "I have read the preliminary reports. You stayed behind after evacuation to retrieve medical supplies, then rescued 2 civilians in extreme conditions, then made a 3-kilometer journey through a Category 5 storm to save an infant's life. Is that accurate?" Tom looked uncomfortable with the attention. "I did what needed doing." "What needed doing?" Commander Wells repeated, something like awe in her voice. "Mr. Blake, what you did was extraordinary. You displayed courage and selflessness far beyond any reasonable duty. On behalf of the Outer Colonies Administration, I want to commend your actions." "Anyone would have done it," Tom said quietly. "No," Kessa spoke up from her own bed, holding Mira close. "No, they would not have. Most species would have died in the first hour outside. Even if they survived, they would not have heard my daughter crying from that distance. Even if they heard, they might not have risked themselves for strangers. Tom did all of this and then risked his life again to save Mira. Not anyone. Only him." Commander Wells nodded. "Miss Kessa is correct. We will be filing an official commendation. Your actions reflect the best qualities of humanity." Tom looked away, clearly wanting the conversation to end. Kessa recognized the gesture. He did not do this for recognition. He did it because he could not do otherwise. Over the next few days, as they traveled to Hub Station Meridian, Kessa had time to think about her future. Vela was gone, destroyed in the war that had scattered her people across the galaxy. She had been traveling to a Velan refugee settlement when the attack happened. But now, watching Tom interact with Mira during the journey, teaching the infant human lullabies in his rough voice, she realized something. She wanted her daughter to grow up around humans. Around people who understood that survival meant helping others survive. Around people who turned their pain into purpose. At Hub Station Meridian, there was a formal debriefing. Kessa was asked to testify about what happened on Refuge Station. She stood before a panel of officials from multiple species and told her story clearly. Tom Blake demonstrated why humans have become valued across the galaxy, she concluded. Not because they are stronger or tougher, though they are both. But because they choose to use that strength to protect others. Because they endure not just physical hardship but emotional trauma, and still extend kindness. My daughter is alive because a human heard her crying and decided one more saved child mattered more than his own safety. She paused, looking at the panel. I am formally requesting asylum on a human colony world. I want Mira to grow up learning these values. I want her to understand what real strength looks like. The request was approved within a week. Kessa and Mira were granted settlement rights on New Vancouver, a thriving colony world known for its rescue and disaster relief operations. It seemed fitting. Tom returned to his salvage work, but he visited. At first it was once a month, checking on how they were settling in. Then more frequently. He brought toys for Mira, helped Kessa navigate human customs and culture, became a steady presence in their lives. 3 months after Refuge Station, Kessa made a decision. She applied to join New Vancouver's Rescue Operations Training Program. When Tom found out, he looked at her with surprise. Are you sure? He asked. It is dangerous work. Hard work. I am sure, Kessa said. You gave me my life back in that shelter. You showed me what it means to survive with purpose. I want to pass that forward. I want to help others the way you helped me. Tom smiled, that rare genuine smile that transformed his face. Then I will help you train. If you will have me as an instructor. I would be honored. The training was brutal. Kessa learned emergency medicine, search and rescue techniques, survival skills for extreme environments. She learned to climb, to rappel, to navigate in zero visibility. She learned to make quick decisions under pressure, to stay calm when others panicked. Tom was there through all of it, a patient teacher who pushed her to be better while never pushing too hard. He taught her that rescue work was not about being fearless. It was about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. On weekends they would sit together watching Mira play, this odd little family they had formed. Tom had become Uncle Tom to Mira, who adored him completely. He taught her human songs and games, carried her on his shoulders, made her laugh with silly faces. One evening, after Mira had fallen asleep, Kessa and Tom sat on the porch of her small home, watching New Vancouver's twin moons rise. Do you ever regret it? Kessa asked quietly. Staying in rescue work? Putting yourself at risk over and over? Tom was quiet for a long time. No, he finally said. This work gives me purpose. Every person I help, every life I save, it connects me to Sarah and Michael and Sophie. It makes their loss mean something. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Kessa said. You honor them by saving others. Maybe, Tom said. Or maybe I am just stubborn. Kessa laughed. You are definitely stubborn. But that is a good thing. They sat in comfortable silence, two survivors who had found each other in the cold and dark. Kessa thought about that night on Refuge Station, about lying in the frozen alcove ready to die. She thought about the warmth of human arms pulling her back from the edge. Tom, she said softly. Thank you. For everything. Thank you for trusting me, Tom replied. For letting me be part of Myra's life. For passing forward what I gave you. That matters more than you know. Inside, Mira stirred and made a small sound. Both Kessa and Tom turned toward the house, their instincts the same. Protect the child. Keep her safe. Make sure she grows up knowing she is loved. That was humanity's true gift to the galaxy, Kessa thought. Not strength or endurance, though they had both in abundance. But the simple, stubborn insistence that every life mattered. That no one should die alone in the cold if it could be prevented. That grief could become grace and pain could become purpose. She stood, preparing to check on her daughter. Tom stood with her, ready to help as always. Together they walked inside, two rescuers bound by the warmth they had shared in humanity's darkest moment. The galaxy was vast and often cruel. But it was also filled with humans who refused to let others suffer alone. And that, Kessa knew, made all the difference.